Welcome to Flow with Recess, a podcast to help you unlock your best self. Join Chief Psychology Officer of Recess, Matt Swartz, and our CEO, Kelz Bethel, your hosts on this journey to flow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 10th episode of Flow with Recess. I am Chief Flow Officer Matt Swartz.
And I am co-founder Kelz.
And we're excited to have you guys here for the last in sort of this season, this initial 10 episodes of the Flow with Recess podcast. And today we're going to be talking about, on our personal growth journeys, what are some key core elements? And we're looking at it from the perspective of, especially, one of our big things that we've talked about is that trauma-informed perspective and, especially dealing with, I think, anxiety. And anxiety is just really an example because this can be used for really anything, is what's the difference between managing, healing, and growing? And we're going to talk about the difference, and we're going to talk about what it's meant in our lives, for Kelz, for myself. We're going to talk about how these approaches have shaped what we've constructed inside Recess, inside the app, in the supporting foundations of Flow, and what it means for your personal growth journey, and how you can find that balance between, all of these components in order to maximize your growth, and hopefully how Recess can help with that.
Yeah. Super excited about this episode. I think that people will be really interested in learning what are these differences, because I feel like a lot of us sort of merge and mesh everything into one. But I mean, maybe we could just start with the understanding, Matt, of really what is the difference between when we talk about managing, healing, and growth? Is it different? How is it different? And let's get into it.
Here's your 30-second bilateral moment. If you aren't already using headphones, now's the time to grab them and keep the flow going. Take this time to reconnect with your body and mind. Just listen to the sound move back and forth between your headphones and pay attention to the sensations in your body. Liked that? For more bilateral moments and full-length tracks, check out our bilateral playlist on YouTube. Links provided in the show notes.
Yeah. So, I was at a presentation I was given on Wednesday, and I said, one of the things I do is I try to make the invisible visible, right? I'm trying to help make these abstract, confusing aspects of personal growth tangible and meaningful to you. And I think for so many of us, when we talk about our personal growth journeys, it's very much like going into a woods and being like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know where I'm going, and I'm just, I'm reading these books and I'm following these people and they're all saying something different and you're right. And so, I try to bring in frameworks that allow us to understand these things in a simple, concrete way. So what I see is that when it comes to healing and growing in this personal growth journey, there's really three key parts. There's kind of a fourth part, which we're not really talking about, which is the distracting part, which is like the I'm not growing part. We're not going to worry about that today. That's no fun. But after that part comes these sort of evolving understandings of what our personal growth journey might mean. Okay, so let's start with managing. Very typically, and I'm going to use anxiety as an example because this is sort of like the best example I can use, right? Say you have anxiety, you recognize you're having anxiety, whether it's ruminating thoughts or your heart's pounding or you're having panic attacks or, you're having these big emotions or you're afraid of approaching particular things. And let's think about this at work, right? Maybe there's some anxiety about some new work you're doing, you have a new job, you have a new project, something like that, right? Okay, you go to a therapist or you go to a coach, and almost always the first thing they're going to be doing is managing. Okay? And what does that mean? You're raising your awareness to what's going on. You're learning about it. You're reading books. You're understanding. You're listening to the therapist or the coach. And then you're learning skills to manage the negative feelings. Why are we doing that? So that we can gain a sense of power, right? If I've been feeling crummy for a really long time, I'm not ready for something really deep. I just need, give me a breathing exercise. Give me a thought challenging exercise. Give me something to help me feel better right now. Right? And as I do that, as I learn those management skills, it gives me a sense of power and capability and influence over the experience that's happening to me. And I start, instead of sort of feeling like I'm wandering in the woods, confused, it's like, oh, I'm a person trying to navigate this woods. And there are particular things I can do, such as build a tent, light a fire, set a trap to hunt a rabbit. I don't know, right? Like there are specific things I can do to make this experience more navigable. And again, I kind of call all that management.
Makes sense. Yeah. So it's like first with a level of awareness, and then you get the skills to cope, to just deal with where you're at that current point in time.
Right.
So
understanding and decreasing pain really is what it's about. Right.
Yeah. And then what about the next one? What about healing? Like, what is the difference between when we move from this management space to start to look at healing some of these experiences?
So in a somewhat kind of arbitrary timeline, a lot of people, generally work on that management stuff for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I always say kind of like 3 to 5 years, right? Yeah. I say for most people like 3 to 5 years in really good like mindfulness-based CBT therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, like that's an amazing foundation for anybody to have on a personal growth journey, right? Is just the meat and potatoes, gaining the awareness of the patterns of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that are causing them distress, and learning skills for managing those things, learning skills for changing their habits, for changing their thinking, for changing how they're feeling. Okay. But then inevitably, as I did, and I'll talk about that when I talk about my story, people hit a wall of some kind, which is like, okay, I'm like feeling 40% or 50% or 60% better, but I'm not noticing any really big seismic changes that I was wanting to see. And, depending on the coach or the therapist you're working with, they're either going to say, well, I don't know, this is all I know, and then it may be time to find the next person, or they're going to say, okay, sounds like you're ready. You're ready for the next step. And the next step is healing. And what healing is looking to understand the injuries that are causing the pain. Okay? So I'm bleeding, I need to put a Band-Aid on it, management, right? Or my leg's broken, I need to wrap it and get some crutches, right? But the healing says, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And then what do we need to do to put it in a space where, I'm going to put a cast on it so that now that healing can occur. Good news about healing. Healing happens naturally. Our system, our brain and our body are naturally designed to heal. The doctor doesn't heal the broken bone. The doctor helps provide the context for the broken bone to heal itself. Same with our brain, right? A good therapist, a good coach, a good spiritual mentor, whatever, will set the space, help you create the space for the healing to occur. And in tangible form, what is that? That is going to find those emotional injuries. This is where we begin to move into more of that trauma-informed approach, right? What happened to me, not what's wrong with me, that's management. What happened to me, that's healing. What happened to me such that I'm hurting, and how do I allow that to heal and repair it? And that's when we start to see some of the bigger seismic shifts in our lives, where we see relationships really begin to change. A lot of people who move into healing find a lot of old relationships falling off.
Yeah.
You don't see that so much in management. That's not,
True.
You're trying to communicate better with your friends. You're trying to get them to understand you better. That's management. Healing is watching old relationships fall away and new ones begin to form that are supportive of the new person and the new journey you're trying to go on and you're trying to become. right?
Yeah.
Or we see
Yeah.
job shifts, or we see shifts with your family, right? You may be setting boundaries that you didn't set before. Because again, that's necessary for the healing. The cast sets a boundary so that that bone doesn't keep getting hurt again. A
Hurt.
lot of
Yeah.
times in that healing, we need to set boundaries with people that have been repeatedly hurting us at home, at work, in our friendships, in order to decrease that pain continuing so that we can allow the healing to occur. And
Yeah.
some of the same things that we used in management, and we'll talk about this a little more in a second, like coping skills like a breathing exercise, can be used in healing, but they're used in a different way, which is to say, we provide in the healing, instead of using the breathing exercise to make pain go away, we're using the breathing exercise to give loving attention to the part of us that's in pain and listen to understand that pain better. So in that case, it's a breathing exercise, that's for our body, right? My body
Yeah.
is hurting, and I need to listen to it and understand, not just help it breathe better, but understand where that anxiety is coming
Where
from.
it's coming from.
Rather than stop the anxiety, where is this coming from? Why are you hurting? How can I help you?
Yeah, yeah, that makes so much sense. I feel like, this is, I know it's not on it's not necessarily on a map, or maybe there is sort of a map, but I could see the transition from one space into the next. And I could also understand that even though it's not necessarily concurrent, it kind of within your growth, within your journey in development, I could see that each one is like super important.
Yeah, and I
And
want to
what
be
about,
clear. It's
mhm,
not linear, right? I'm
yes.
not saying, oh, you do the managing, then you do the healing. There might be
Yes.
back and forth, and things might be happening together, or they might be happening separate. There's no, everybody's journey is different. You might find yourself managing and then healing and then going back to managing, or it
Yeah.
might be different days, right? Like one day, or
Definitely.
different targets, right? Right now I'm in a space to heal with my family, but I'm still managing at work, or vice versa,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's usually not very cut and dry, but it's helpful to understand those different processes. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Makes sense. No, no, no. I think that's really important for people to understand as well, that it's not like a linear situation. But also in terms of, now I'm curious. So we understand management, we understand when you get into that space of healing, then what is really the difference now with growth? Like,
Yeah,
how does growth look? What is the difference in when we start to,
totally.
change, grow? Yeah.
Yeah, so growth is the new stuff, right? Growth is, what are the new seeds I'm planting, right? What are the new habits I'm forming? What are the new goals I'm setting? What are the new beliefs that I'm putting in place, right? And again, there may be overlap between some of these areas. You might want to think of it like a threefold Venn diagram. There are things that would totally be growing and managing, right? Learning how to meditate. Is that managing? Yeah. And is that growing? Yeah. And then maybe that's healing too, depending on how you use it, right?
Use it,
So
yeah.
so there it definitely, they can overlap, but the growth is the new stuff. And I
Yeah.
think honestly, culturally, we lean more into the management and the growth stuff first, and we leave the healing out. And at least that was my journey. I was doing the managing and then the growing, and then I had
Growth,
to
yeah.
double back for the healing because I hadn't learned
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately what that means is when the growth occurs from the seeds of the pain, the growth is still informed by the pain. So what does that look like? That looks like a particular job that still reflects your lack of worth. It looks like a
Exactly.
relationship where you're still pleasing everybody instead of asking for what you need or setting healthy boundaries. And so then unfortunately, you have to double back and you have to do the healing not only on the origin of the problem, but also on the growth, right? So,
Yeah.
I've planted this apple tree that is sick. Well, now I have to help this apple tree heal and plant a new apple tree as well, right?
Happen, you have to,
And
yeah.
sometimes I can heal that apple tree, and other times I have to leave it and move on and just focus on the new growth, right?
Yeah.
So, growth can be my new identity. Growth can be my new beliefs. Growth can be the new life I'm trying to build. And again, all of these things can work in concert and work in harmony. And what I'm more interested in is, are you balancing all of these things effectively? And
Yeah.
and the other note I would make is I think you'd find the more, while managing is extremely necessary in the early parts of the journey especially, the more you can heal and grow, the less those management skills become essential. The more healing,
Yeah.
the less there is to manage. And then you can put more and more energy into the growth, right? So
Yeah.
the more healing decreases the management, maximizes the growth, and not only increases, say, the speed or the veracity, but the healthiness of that growth, right? Am
I
I
think that's important. Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's super important in terms of understanding because, as you said, I think culturally, especially in Western society, there's this emphasis on growth. There's this whole movement with growth mindset and developing new skills and and this sort of thing. But the reality is, at least from my experience, is that some of this growth that we're doing is also maladaptive.
right?
It's also maladaptive. There's also a level of coping because we haven't healed. So we are building skills and doing things that are really, as you said, from a place of pain and I think it's super important to even remember that even as we go through our growth journey that, the healing is super important.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I'm interested. I think I've given enough theory. I've made the delineations.
Yeah.
How, as you're kind of thinking through these concepts, how is this shown up in your story, in your experience, and especially, I mean, the last thing you said, where growth has been maladaptive. I think that's something that you and I, both have experienced.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I think it's similar for you, Matt, where, for me, I started, therapy for like, just general like depression and stuff. So I, was always familiar with like CBT and, the first thing we learn is a level of awareness, a level of consciousness. We learn about our thoughts, behaviors, we try to cope and to, relieve our symptoms. My symptoms at that time was being like super anxious and super depressed as I navigate, everything. What happened to me is that I think as I started to manage better, I just jumped straight into extreme growth. So what happened is that I hyper focused on success. I hyper focused on goals that I wanted to achieve, hyper focused on, just general. I mean, I think as, some of us millennials too, we hyper focused on achievement, right? And I thought, and that is what I thought growth was. So that was coming also from a place of, that was like from a maladaptive place because that was supposed to give me a sense of fulfillment,
Right.
but
I
focusing on
need this achievement in order to be okay, right?
exactly. And using and growing through those things, thinking that developing specific skills, doing certain things, developing new things was all related to one dimension, which was coming out of a place of lack of healing.
Yeah.
And I think what happened to me is that I feel like I'm still in this process because I feel like my true healing only started, I would always say this, like amidst COVID and everything, because I think completely burnt out, completely had a crash. I mean, a lot of people had this experience. Change, switch directions and gears, similar to what you're saying, because I realized that, where is my motivation coming from? Not doing things that is truly connected to me. So also figuring me out. And although I used to, similar to what you said, although I meditated and I used mindfulness, coming into 2020 and the pandemic, just checking in with myself was part of my healing process. And in consistently checking into myself, I realized something similar to what you mentioned in the healing process. Things started to change. I started to change the direction of things that I wanted to do. Relationships started to fall off. New spaces, started to happen. And I think what is happening is that I am coming down from sort of like a hyper vigilance and sort of settling into myself through healing. And I still feel like this is an ongoing process. But I would say for me, my experience has been going straight into this idea of growth. Idea of growth, and I feel like on social media, for all of the us who consume all this personal development content, I think that it literally points us to growth, 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 but really misses the point of the fact that we do need to heal. And I think that was my experience as well. That even some of the content, motivational speaking, all of this, you know, gave me this space to grow new skills and change and develop, but still ended up in crashing at some point.
Yeah.
What about you, Matt? Like, how was your experience with? Oh,
So I was trying to think of his name. So like, two things. Example, and then I have a question for you. Like,
yeah,
so Tim Ferriss is a great example of this, where
yeah,
with several. I mean, I followed Tim Ferriss back in the day, and Tim Ferriss had a lot of what I call Tony Robbins energy, which is like go and hit it and be and perform and kill it all and break it off and just go 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 go, right? And there came a time where if you look at Tim Ferriss's stuff, a lot of it's trauma informed. And he's reflecting now on how he was doing this. He was growing, 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 and he wasn't healing. And he had to take a step back, and I think there was different factors and that helped sort of influence, and now he's more focused on some of those healing aspects and finding that balance in business. So even some of these like big influencers, right, like Tim Ferriss, they're seeing this, they're understanding this, right? I'm curious for you, I don't know if you want to, work is probably the easiest, but like, can you give a tangible example? Because I think most people are certainly relating to the larger picture, but can you give a tangible example of, like you said, it sort of started in COVID, like where was that showing up and what's changing?
yeah. I think in COVID it was everything. So I mean, I could speak about work, but I could also speak about, for example, relationships, because I think even within COVID, work and relationships sort of was tied to me. So I was always trying to prove something. So in relationships, I was trying to, you know, prove that I am this, whatever this is. Similarly in work, it was like I'm trying to prove that I am like a successful person. It's coming from a place of lack in everything that I was doing. And I think in the beginning of COVID being still and everything sort of not working, it affected my identity. And even realizing that while I was trying to grow to prove this thing, not even realizing that I'm trying to prove it, um, I recognize that that there's something underneath that's broke, that needs work. That like I needed to heal, because the motivation for, let's say, relationships, I would want to be this sort of person, which is always outward. I would want to be seen in this particular way. And I was always feeling like I had this identity that I was chasing after. And that in of itself, that took a lot of space to even recognize that was what was happening.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us, at that point, I was just caught up in just, living, So my healing started for me in recognizing that my behavior is being fueled by something that's my own trauma, my own early childhood stuff that was making me feel inadequate. And I was trying to connect and reach to something that was outside of myself.
Yeah, great example. It's the proving in order, to be seen, to be good enough, that dynamic. And like you say, there are people who are going to listen to this and they're going to kind of get it. But the reality is there are a lot of people that are listening to this that have that very same dynamic. I know I did, right? Where I wasn't realizing that so many of the things I was trying to build was founded from a place of lack, from a place of not enough, right? And again, back to our forest analogy, if a tree is trying to grow from a place of I don't have enough water to do this, right? Like that's not you're gonna grow really tall and then you're gonna fall over, or you're gonna you're gonna grow too fast and you're not gonna have enough resources and you're gonna burn out. And again, we see this all the time in achievement culture: quick growth, burnout. Quick growth, right? And so again, this is not something that's relegated to economics or politics or emotional health. This happens in the natural world when natural creatures mismanage or misunderstand their resources. So this isn't just a human problem, right? But we as humans have consciousness that, you can debate me, but that I don't think trees quite have, that allows us to go, oh, this isn't going to work, right? Like this will not help me sustainably grow. I'm so busy comparing myself to these bigger trees and trying to get big that I'm not trying to think about, okay, how did these trees get big? What does this process really look like? I can see the outside, but I can't see the inside. And the inside, to get really big and really successful in a healthy way, right, is coming from a place of abundance or enoughness or okayness
Exactly.
or however you want to phrase it. So, yeah, great example that I think a lot of people are also, like you say, I think a lot of people, a lot of achievers through COVID and afterwards have become very aware of this dynamic, and we're talking about it more. And I think you and I are right on, we're talking to the right people because this is right where a lot of people are.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And what about you, Matt? Like, what is an example or experience that you had that kind of shows your relationship with these three things?
Want to get even deeper into your flow? Learn more about today's episode on our blog, The Science of Productivity. Find out more about today's topic by visiting our blog, Boosting Attention, Focus, and Concentration. Our mental health app can help. Here, you'll get more insights and tips on how you can maintain your flow state every day.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I'll frame it again in the context of both work and relationships, and I've told a little bit of this story before. Um, so when I was a kid and I did all my therapy, I was lucky I had parents doing the best they could at the time, right? What I learned was you need to change yourself to make other people happy, and then it'll all be okay, right? You have ADHD, you have anxiety, just do the things everybody else wants you to do, da da da. So I did that, and I learned how to do it really well, and I was a high achiever, and I got all A's, and I made everybody, and after I got, sick of people getting mad at me for misbehaving in class, I shut up. And after, so I just continued to mold myself and mold myself and mold myself to meet the expectations, the high expectations of everybody in around me, because I grew up in a really high achievement culture, in a really high achievement place. And then, as an adult, when I went back to therapy, right, like what I realized was, okay, I'm anxious and I need to learn how to manage the physiological aspects of this anxiety. Like, oh, it's not mysterious. There's, I need to learn breathing exercises and I need to regulate my body, and this is chemical and, all of that. It wasn't just change my behavior. It was, oh, I need to change, scientifically and physiologically, and all of that was. And so, I took all of that. And I brought that into my practice as a therapist, right? And I was working with all these people with anxiety and panic attacks and all the stuff that I had dealt with. And I was teaching them how to change their thoughts and behaviors to make other people happy. And I was teaching them, mindfulness skills and self-regulation skills to deal with the physiology of their body, right? But all of it was centered around, and I didn't realize this at the time, this sort of, propagandized idea of what happiness and achievement look like. That was a story from other people, right? I am very lucky to have my wife, because at some point my wife said to me in different ways, like, hey, this isn't working. Like, you don't have to work 70 hours a week to make your business successful. This is insane. Like, and I think at the time, maybe a little selfishly, she was like, I'm not seeing you enough. This isn't working, right? Like, we live together. I barely see you. Come on, right? And then when we got pregnant with our first kid, I was getting angry and frustrated all the time because my energy was so low, and now I have to save money differently and do these things, and we got a house and we got a this, and I was taking it out on her, and she was like, okay, you've got to go back to therapy. You've got to go do this work, right? So I went to trauma-informed therapy. I went to EMDR. I did the healing. I did the trauma work. And my relationships changed and my practice changed. And so I'll give sort of the underlying idea, and then I'll give an example. For me, the underlying idea, and proving was part of this, but for me, it all comes back down to, instead of trying to mold ourselves, trying to find our authentic selves and plug into that. And for me, there's a spiritual component to that, which is that we all have this, seed within us. And if we can grow the apple tree that we are instead of trying to be the oak tree somebody else is, things are going to get a lot easier. And for me, what that meant is dismantling some things in my life. And honestly, like during COVID, I didn't grow very much. I healed a lot, but I didn't grow very much. I had a growing speaking career. I actually kind of set that on the back burner, and it really kind of fell off a little. I haven't done as much speaking since before COVID, right? And I could have hit it hard and done the online things and all of that, but I had to spend the energy on healing. And I didn't grow many friendships in that time. I've only started that in the past year. I've been really focused on growing friendships and growing community. And I really didn't grow my business very much. I stopped networking. I stopped, I just kind of let the pipeline that I'd already built continue to trickle in. And it because healing takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I want to make people aware of that. I'm not saying don't do it, obviously, but what I'm saying is understand that, again, management, healing, growth, you only have so much energy. You can only do so much. So understand that you may need to make temporary productivity sacrifices for some of that healing sometimes. But then for me, what does that look like? That's looked like going from friendships only centered around my business to friendships centered around my interests and personal growth and my family, and so different diverse communities and that feed different parts of me rather than only feeding the achiever part, right? What else has that looked like? That's looked like being able to work with the clients that are the best fit for me, being able to give away the clients that aren't, because I don't have to fix everybody. And then some of that energy now goes to my family. Yeah. And some of that energy goes to building those friendships. And some of that energy goes to curating my relationship with myself. Whereas before it was 70 hours a week trying to make everybody else feel better and trying to make everybody else happy. And counterintuitively, my income's gone up, not down. Right? Because I'm doing the real work that makes real sense to me. Instead of doing it 70 hours a week, I'm doing it 40 hours a week, but I'm doing it better. I'm doing it more deeply, and I'm doing it with people who see the value, and it's all coming more easily, right? So sacrifices, yes, need to be made, but I assure you the growth will be healthier, and it will be more organic, and it will be more robust. And that, at least that's been my experience. And for me, all of that falls under the umbrella of finding flow. Right? The more we do this healing work, the more flow, which again, in my opinion, comes from connection with our inner self, our true, authentic place. The more and connection with that in the outside in appropriate ways. But for me, I had to right size that connection. The more we find flow, the more we can understand where management, where growth, where healing come in appropriately. And the more we can do that appropriately, the more we find flow. So it's very much an interactive sort of chicken and egg kind of situation. But the more we do that, the sort of easier it gets to know the direction in the forest that we need to navigate.
Yeah. Completely important. Thanks for sharing that, Matt. I think that is important, and also helping that relationship with us building and finding flow.
And so I think what that's meant, right, is that, in those journeys, you and I have taken that, and Lisanne as well, and we've put that into Recess. And so, Recess isn't just an app, right? I mean, that's part of it. But Recess is a technology that is used to promote flow, right, promote mental fitness, but it's informed by a healthy balance between management, healing, and growth, and helping people to find that. And I think you'd probably be best equipped to talk about some of those different aspects of Recess that can help people in balancing that journey.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what I could probably do is kind of just explain really how Recess does that, and just go through so I would go through like the functional way Recess works, and then you could probably add in the context in terms of how each part of it really helps in different ways, but how really what Recess does, firstly, as we highlighted, in terms of that understanding, the first thing that we need to do is understand ourselves. The first thing that Recess does is that it helps us to understand our level of arousal, meaning how stressed we are within our body, on that continuum, whether or not we are super aroused and very anxious, or whether or not we are more on shutdown and more within our depressive state. So the first thing Recess does is, because we understand that our physical body is really where stores all this information, or is really where stores this information. So Recess first helps us identify our level of arousal. Then we help to track our intentions daily, right? So we go into what are our 3 intentions for the day, and we rank our intentions for the day, which are our daily goals, and we stop it at 3, and we help rank that by how challenging is this thing for us to do, and if we feel like we're able to do it, how challenging and do we feel able. And based on that, our proprietary system then basically helps you to see what is your level, identify where you are on the flow scale, right? And that is from telling you, you're super worried, you're anxious, you're within a space of flow, and based on that, we give the right recommendation for one of our flow sessions based on the Foundations of Flow model, right? And we went through for this, for the entire podcast this season, we went through and we spoke about those four main sessions that we have within the application, which is the peace session, which would help you regulate your level of anxiety and stress. We have the purpose session that is focused on, your goals. We have the potential session that is focused on building your feeling of capability and worth. And the last one is the present session that really helps us dial into be more focused and aware. And the Recess app basically takes all this data in terms of your arousal, your intentions, your ability, your challenge, and recommends your right session for you. And so we help you to identify your flow states and then the right session, right? And that's really how we go through the process with Recess, because what we have realized in our own growth journey, as we highlighted, that in of itself is a challenge. Recognizing where we are is a challenge, and being able to identify what we need at a particular time is a challenge. And we understand that you would need different things, and the Recess app facilitates that process through the daily recess.
And I think, in terms of the sort of more conceptual understanding regarding those three different stages, right? I think it's safe to say that Recess is most focused on growth, that Recess is focused on opening a door for people into healing. We recognize that we can't do all of that ourselves, right? But we want to invite you into that journey and encourage you to take what you're learning from Recess and continue that journey. And I think in terms of management, we're really trying to help people move from management and into those other aspects a little more so. There are aspects of Recess that are oriented towards management, but again, we're not trying to get you to willpower your way into productivity. We're trying to help you soothe yourself into productivity. We're trying to help you align yourself into productivity. What I think most people will find is that because this technology reflects you back at you rather than tells you what to do, that the technology will help you know which of those directions you need to move. And rather than giving all the examples, let me just use one foundation of flow as an example, okay? So let's pick, one of the ones that we have found actually is the most helpful, which is the focus session, the present session, which we've actually found can help people increase their focus by over 50% in the initial data, which was a real surprise to us. We thought people would be like, oh, the peace session is great for stress and the productivity session is the best. But it turns out the present session, the focus session, right? So let's talk about it through these three filters, right? So the present session helps you to grow and promote a healthy sense of focus by connecting and integrating the different parts of your brain rather than forcing yourself to focus. When I was doing ADHD therapy as a kid, they were trying to force me to focus, right? That's not the bilateral technology helps us find this natural state of focus. And oh my gosh, the more that happens, the more you grow that, the more you do that, the easier it gets. And now you know what focus feels like, so you can practice other things that help you get to that same space because you know what the destination is, rather than somebody telling you what focus feels like. So that's the growth, right? The healing, and again, it sort of starts you on the healing, and then hopefully you'll continue that journey outside of Recess. It helps you recognize the things that are getting in the way of your focus, right? Exactly. As you're doing that bilateral session, it's going to tell you, oh, this is blocking you, and it's hard to explain it till you do it, but basically you'll be sitting there doing the bilateral and suddenly go, oh, this is blocking me. Okay, well now you need to do something about it. And it may be small stuff, like, oh, I'm too addicted to my phone. Okay, yeah. But it may be large stuff like, oh, I have these negative experiences with school or with my family or with whatever, and I got to go work on those if I'm really going to promote long-term focus, right? And then the management part, again, it's trying to get people out of like the Pomodoro technique, forcing yourself to focus. We had a user who's given us a testimonial. I think it's okay for me to share that with Sarah, right?
Yeah.
Who talked, we have that on the website, so that's already public, right? Who's, was talking about, okay, she does the focus session and then she just goes to do her work and it moves you, right? And so it's like, for some people, it's like, okay, I focus for 20 minutes and then my body naturally says to stop. Okay, don't force yourself to do a half an hour, right? But then most people find, oh, I'm like going for 2 hours because I'm in the flow. So I don't need to take my Pomodoro breaks and I don't need to force it and I don't need to do the management, right? It kind of naturally goes, oh, focus for 2 hours, and then it slowly fades and you go, okay, I'm ready for a walk. Because hopefully you're still in flow. Now, if you try to push forward past that, I'm going to keep focusing, you're out of the flow. You're going to miss those cues that your body and brain says naturally, okay, it's time to take a break. It's time to go for a walk. But the more you use it, the better you get, the less you're going to find yourself finding focus techniques, and the more you're going to find yourself naturally and healthfully moving into that focus.
Yeah, and it's about flow for us. It's about that ease. It's about using your body to be able to get your own insights, and I think that's really all, that's what we're about. That's about finding your flow, and that's what Recess is about, allowing yourself to give you the answers and to guide you in the direction that you should go.
All right, Kel. So these, our audience that's been with us, that's been listening, that's ready to move into this, right? How do they get involved with Recess? What can they do now? What can they do moving forward?
Yeah, so right now we're about to launch a pilot, right? I mean, different people would listen to this at different times. But so I'd start with, if you're an individual and you want to get started with Recess, you could go to our website, withrecess.com, and you could sign up to use the beta of the application, right? And if you if you're listening to this before September 2022, you could go on, you could sign up for early access to the application, and you would come on get early access. If you have, listening to this podcast later on, you could go onto the App Store and download the application and start to use Recess, right? But more than that, what we've noticed is that there is this idea of a collective flow, and we want to help businesses and teams also build their capacity for flow, and that interconnectivity for flow, for businesses and teams as well. And so if you want to be involved as a business and you say like, yeah, I want this for my team, then you could also go on and you could sign up at withrecess.com/work, and you could come on board as a pilot, because what we're doing is that we're actually having a capped pilot for 10 companies who were ready to do this for their team, so that they could come on early, give feedback, and really use and start to implement some of this technology for their team. And with that, we also have Matt that would be guiding the team along, doing some of those flow sessions. And so we want to continue some of the work, some of the things that we're talking about here. And as we are going towards launch as well, a big thing that we would be doing, Matt, is that we would be, building the community, because there's a group of us who really are on this journey. And what we want to do is start to in different ways, even beyond this podcast, highlight more content. We have more blogs coming out. We have more our podcasts, and what we'll be doing is, creating and curating more content for people, and also at the same time building a community. So there's a lot to look out for. But to just keep up to date on all this progress, I would say to go to the website withrecess.com and sign up, get your name on the list, and then you would be updated as we progress with everything that's happening. So you would be in the know.
Yeah. And you can also find us on Instagram, right?
Yes.
At With Recess.
Yes,
And
at
we
With
are also
Recess.
on, well, I think we're still trying to figure out some of where we're at, but we're definitely on
Yeah.
Instagram.
We are definitely on Instagram. Yeah.
And there's going to be more podcasts. And as Kelz mentioned, we have a couple blogs that would probably be really good to start with. And I think, we'll be able to link those in the description of at least some of these podcasts. There is the overall sort of like master blog on flow state. What is flow state? How does it work? What are the aspects? So if you're like, okay, I need to learn more about flow, that. We'll also be putting out a blog that's specifically about the foundations of flow and what those are and how to sort of hack them and gain skills and understand each of those factors and build each of those factors, each of those foundations of flow, so that you can grow flow both inside recess but outside recess as well. And as Kel said, like we're both, all of us are super passionate about this community. I'm really passionate about growing a community of people who are evolving their consciousnesses, who are leaders and affecting other people by growing in a healthy way through their healing. And I'm just excited to be part of that growing community and inspired by all you guys who each have your unique creative gifts and each different ways you're growing that I'm learning from as well. Yeah, so that's really exciting. So I think that's it. That is the conclusion of our first series, our first season of this podcast, our first 10 episodes. And we appreciate you guys being with us and bringing along for the ride and learning more about us and learning more about recess, and hopefully, most of all, learning more about yourselves and more about your growth. And that's what really turns me on and gets me excited. I'm sure we'll be back. There will be more podcasts. Connect with us. We're real human beings. We want to connect with you. We want to help you grow. We're here to support you. Thank you so much for being with us on our Flow with Recess podcast. Kelz, any famous last words?
No, just join us. I would say just join us, grow with us and join the community as we ourselves as a company also grow. Yeah.
That's what it's all about. Our individual and our collective journeys, and then hopefully that bigger journey with the community. We're excited to be on it with you. Thanks so much, Kelz. This has been so much fun doing with you, and I look forward to all the things we're continuing to create together.
Yes. All right. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Flow with Recess. By the way, your flow doesn't have to end here. Our Recess app helps listeners unlock their most productive selves by reducing anxiety and improving their focus. You can find out more about our app as well as more resources to support you on your journey by visiting our website withrecess.com. Links to our bilateral playlist and this week's blog post are also found in our show notes. Until next time, find your flow and get unstuck with Recess.